Marry Me, Annie here. I haven't had the opportunity to post a kind of for fun video in quite some time. Well, I've done a lot of videotaping over the past months for the Season of the Seeker program for the last year and a half, and then recently for the Tarot Together series. But because of time and some life constraints, I've had to pull back from being as engaged in community discussions as I'd like to be. Oh, I've been engaged in the sense that I'm watching them and interested in the things that I see. We are an interesting community to follow. Educational and moving and sometimes frustrating. And then there's these glorious moments where something happens where we meet somebody new or learn something new about someone we followed for a long time. And this video tag, the 77 Witchy Community Questions tag, has been an opportunity for that for me. I learned surprising things about folks I love and have come to know, I thought, very well. Always nice to learn new things. And then it's the opportunity for those I've not spent time with to get to know them a bit from what they have shared. I like the tag because, well, it's a little bit challenging because there's so many questions. 77, like the title says. They're not all questions that have been discussed before. They're hard questions to give a short answer to, especially for someone like me. But I am going to do the response to the tag. I think when I was watching Eva's House of Spirits, when I was watching her responses to it, she split them into groups so the videos wouldn't be too long, and I really like that. So you might find I'm splitting this out. And in that case, I will put the questions for each section that I do in the text to the videos. So here we go with the 77 community tag. Do you use runes as a written language? A symbolic written language, when I do work with them and work with the energy of them, but not as an alphabet, which I think is what the question means. Did the Theban alphabet early on in my practices. I never resonated with it in the sense of I could sit down and have it flow off my pen without having to look and copy and think. So I did it, but even if I went back to look at my own Theban writing later, I don't think it was meant for me to be that much challenged by my own writing. I write in clear English, and I write in shorthand. Now, when I grew up, if you were going into the business world, working in an office, you learned shorthand. You also learned it if you were going to college to take notes. That was back before you could take any kind of recording devices into classrooms with you. It works beautifully for me. It's a cuneiform kind of writing where it's not about individual letters, it's about sounds and the flow of language. And it captures to me the emotion and the rhythm behind language. So I do, and here's an example. Occasionally resort to shorthand, especially when I'm doing spell work for myself. I'm writing something down to make a bond to it or make an offering to it. Do you feel you have natural gifts such as premonitions, hearing spirits, and if so, do you think this is what led you to this path? Well, I certainly have various skills and things I've honed over the years of practice. I don't think that's what brought me to the path, though. I think my coming to this path was indeed a response to the gods. Instinctual yearning, even if I couldn't identify it until later, to be one with the old ones. So what led me to this path was an expression and experience of spirituality. It wasn't about the things that you do as part of that. It was kind of a yearning. What deity do you work with, if any, and why? Well, I work with the two deities that were my first experience of traditional Wicca, and I work at a level now of those deities experienced outside of their names and their naming. And by that I mean I work with the goddess and I work with the god. And both of those titles mean certain things to me. Sometimes they embrace aspects of different specific historic deities. Sometimes, and more often the older I get, it's an experience of what they mean to me and the story that I have come to understand is their story. Have you always worked with this same deity? I would say I have connected to the same source of divine wisdom all along. But I've done it in many different ways over the years. Some things which worked better for me than others. Sometimes I needed to listen more closely to the whispers around me. And other times it was an easier, simpler path to exploring wisdom. Do you use any personal items in your practice like blood, semen, tears, urine, etc.? Whenever I've been called, at any point in my practice, to make an offering of any part of my body, I have. I've just gone with what feels right at the time. Do you do past life readings or have ever had one done? And who were you or how did you die? That is an interesting one for me to answer. I don't believe in past lives. I believe in other lives. I believe our experience of living in the greater sense is outside of time. So I'm out there having another experience at this very moment, different from this one. Or some parts of me are out there. Not as a standalone me, but combined with other identities, experiencing living in a different way. I think because I believe very powerfully in a time outside of time when it comes to the collections of all of our living experiences throughout all of our lives, the readers have not been able to get a good read on me. They get a blank, and they get something that feels like a void. And there have been times they have been disturbed by the fact that they don't go anywhere except what feels like into a hole when they do a reading on me. I don't think there's anything negative about that. I think it's the energy I actually create, because I don't believe in past. I don't believe in after I leave this life I show up again in a future life. Past and future just, it's not the way I relate to the combined experiences of living and gaining wisdom. I believe I'm reassembled as a one, or as in bits and pieces of me sent out into new directions to experience things, but I don't believe that I can regress to a chronological past that led me to here. So that influences how folks do readings when it comes to me. As far as doing readings for others, no, because past and future to me, they only exist within this very moment. What's your favorite magical tool? Outside of my body, I would have to say it's my Peyton, because of the love that was put into making it. It was a gift. And every year that has gone by that I've had it, which has been, this particular one, 40 years, I'd say, the energy of everything that it has been to me, everything I've put on it, everything I've used it to bless, everything I've used it to consecrate and empower, it just has become my portal to the wider energies of existence as I can channel them personally. So I'd say it's my Peyton. What's a song or type of music that gets you into a witchy mood? Well, I don't like words when I am getting into a witchy mood. I will go for something melodic and tonal and reflective, or I will go with something that just encourages union with ecstasy. Where's the most magical place you have ever been? It was oceanside on a cliff on the Oregon coast of the United States. I didn't know it was a sacred place at the time I was there. I just took a walk from a hotel room one day as the sun was rising, ended up on this cliff, and just had one of the most amazing spiritual epiphanies of my life. And I found out later that it was actually a very important spiritual spot for local native tribes. Wow, is all I can say about that experience. There's been other places that I've had moments, but that would be the most powerful experience I ever had. What animal is your familiar, if any? I did have a familiar. I had him for 14, almost 15 years. He was a rescue dog, a Doberman Pit Bull mix by the name of Emmett. I named him after the clown, Emmett Kelly Jr. Emmett was the gentlest soul that I have ever met on the face of this earth. He was familiar in a couple of different ways. He was a spiritual companion who journeyed with me in my workings. He joined me in circle when I was alone or when anybody was with me, and was, in a way, a portal. He opened us up to possibilities that didn't exist without him. He also was the gateway to a very powerful entity that he shared living space with, that partnered with me in my workings. Never had another one before or after him. Sometimes I think it wouldn't be possible to ever have such a perfect relationship again, but I can always hope. If you have a familiar, did you choose them or did they choose you? When I remember how I found Emmett, I have to think that he chose me. I went to the farmer's market to get tomatoes, and right next to the tomatoes was a farmer who had a box full of puppies. And as I reached down to get a tomato, I looked over and his little brown face was peering over the top of the box, and his 9 brothers and sisters were down in the box, and there he was with his amber-colored eyes looking right at me. He came home with me. What in the craft are you best at? Things like tarot, spells, rituals, etc. I had to stop and think best. I'd never really thought in terms of what I do, as in whether I do something better than something else. It's true that I will reach for one skill or another, according to what I feel called to. But I just feel that everything that I've learned at some point has been, in that moment, when I felt I needed it, the thing I did best, because it's why I reached out for it. I would have to say, though, that I'm a witch and a ceremonial magician. The phrase ceremonial magician doesn't get used in a positive way a lot anymore, but I'm highly ritualistic, and I create and I perform, whether it's solo or for others, ritual that gets things done. So I would have to give myself credit that I can always turn to the power of ritual to make manifest. What in the craft would you say you are weaker at? Well, there are things that I could spend more time developing and getting better at. There are things that I need to experiment more with to see what I can make of them. I'm actually still, after a few years of being solitary and practicing on my own after not having been on my own in a while and relying on the power of group magics, I'm still honing my skill as a solitary. What's your most favorite part of your craft? Spell writing, divination, etc. Since the references to spell writing and divination, it seems to be that the favorite part they're talking about is what we do in our practice that is our favorite thing. I would have to resort then back again to the power of ritual for myself. What was the first purchased tool you got. And that required some going back in time for me. Started collecting tools in 1971, 1972, that area in there. And a lot of them were gifts and found items. So I'd say it was a good 10, 15 years before I purchased a tool. And I think the first tool that I purchased was actually a chalice to replace the chalice that I had used all those years. It was a silver plated chalice, and the plating was starting to be etched away, which didn't bother me as far as aesthetics, but it meant that when the wine was put in it, it got this tinny kind of metallic taste. And I went out in search of a new chalice, and I'm thinking that's the first time I put my own money out there to buy a tool. What was your first homemade tool for your practice? Well, I'd have to say to this very day, I don't have any homemade tools. I have found objects from nature. I have gifts people have given me. I have objects that I've purchased. I've made use of objects that intended for other purposes to be tools within my practice. But I've not been a crafter of tools.